Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christine at CSLdesigns, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this graduated roses wirework bracelet. Now it features one resin rose in the very center as a feature, and the rest of the roses we make with the wire. So if you want to learn how to make it, then keep watching. So it's these materials here that we're going to need. I have two different gauges of regular round copper wire. First of all, I have a 0.8mm. This is going to be the base wire. And then I have a 0.4mm, which is going to be the weaving wire. I then also have a single resin rose bead. This is going to be the only bead we're going to need for this design here. This one happens to be a red colour. I thought that would go nicely with the silver, but obviously it's up to you how you want to combine your colours. Now the material list and any links you might need are going to be in the description box below the video. Otherwise, let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. Now I've then cut some lengths of a 0.8mm wire here. I have 4 lengths of about 40 centimeters each, and these are going to be base wires. And then I have 2 lengths of the same wire here, but these are about 1 meter each. Now they're also going to be base wires, but they're also going to be making the roses out of wire, so that's why they're longer, because they're going to get used up a lot more. As for the 0.4mm wire here, I'm not cutting off a length, I'm leaving it attached to the reel, just so we have less wastage, and also it's hard to know exactly how much we're going to need. But then to get started, we need to start out weaving our wires together here. So I've got my 0.4mm, I'm starting towards the end of it. Then I have my 4 lengths of the shorter ones of the base wire, and also I have the 2 lengths that are longer. So I have them all handy here, because like I said, we're just going to start out weaving, but then also in the process putting them together to create one piece. Now I'm going to start with my short wires. So first of all, I'm just taking one because we want to attach a weaving wire first of all. Now what I'm going to do is start about 7 or so centimeters in from the end of the base wire here, just so we have those lengths to finish off the bracelet with at the end, and also have a little tail of my weaving wire just to have something to hold on to. To attach this, I'm going to wrap it around the base wire once, like this, nice and tight, a little wrap, and then that's attached already, and we're going to go straight into the weave. So I'm bringing in my next wire, which is also a short one, placing that above the other one and on top of the weaving wire here. This is going to be the diagonal wire weave, my personal favorite. So I'm then bringing my weaving wire over the top of both of them and down behind. Make sure that your wraps here become nice and tight. Now what I'm then going to do is bring the weaving wire up between the two straight away, like that, and then use that to also push the weave nice and tight together. Your wraps there. Now I'm going to take my next wire, and this one is going to be one of the long ones, again just towards one end here, so they're about even on this end. And as you can see as well, you can move your weave up and down the wires as well, so don't worry about it moving too much, you can just move it back to a certain point. Once you've done a few wraps of your weave, it's going to get harder to move, so just make sure before you get to the point that it is in the place that you want it to be, so we have that length available. But then to continue the weave here, we've added in the next wire, which the base wire, which is a long one. So the bottom 2 are short ones, the next one here is a long one. My weaving wire goes over the top of the top 2 wires, and then bring it down behind your base wires again. And again, this is kind of the concept of the weave. It then comes up between the 2 that you just wrapped over the top of. So that means up between the top 2 there, which is also where you then use it to push down nice and tight, tighten up those wraps. Now the next base wire we're bringing in is also a long one. So just bring this into position, place that above the others as the new top one, like this, and the weaving wire goes now over the top of these top 2 here, one of them being the new one. Just bringing my wires through, and then comes down behind, but to come up between the two we just wrapped over the top of. So basically now up between the two long ones, which is again where we can push it down. And also, because some of the wires here are just a bit longer than the other ones, for now it can be a little bit fiddly just to do the weave, especially with all the wires being loose, but it does get easier, and obviously it's easier if you have more space around you as well. Now we have 2 lengths of base wire left, so those are the ones we need to bring in now, and these are short ones as well. So bring the next one in. We're just going to keep adding them in the same way that we've done all the others. Add it in as a new top one. Bring the weaving wire over the top 2 ones to come down behind, only to come up between the 2 that we just wrapped over the top of. And then push down. And we have the last one, do the same thing. This becomes the new top one. Just like this. And then just repeat. Bringing all my wires through the weaving wire here to come up between these top 2, which are now 2 short ones. And now what we just need to finish off this round with is to wrap around the top one by itself. So just like this, and then I have the weaving wire here coming all the way down behind all of the base wires to come back down towards the very bottom one where we started out our weave. And then you can see this is basically the first round, and it looks a bit like that. Now it can be handy as well just using some pliers just to help if you need to straighten it out a little bit, especially here at the beginning. Obviously do it carefully to not damage the wire. But this is now all the wires attached together, and it's also started out the weave. So that means now we just continue. Obviously we now don't have to add in the base wires, but it's then the same principle of making the weave. So that means my weaving wire is at the bottom. I'm going to go around the bottom base wire first by itself. Then go over the top of the bottom 2 here. So come down between these wires. Wrap that nice and tight. To then bring the weaving wire up between the 2 that I just wrapped across the top of. Just like that. And then go over the top of the next 2, 1 step up. So we're basically stepping up every time, 1 base wire. And working away basically towards the top like we just did, but obviously without having to add the wires in because they're already there. Come up between the 2, use that to push them tight. Over the top of the next 2, stepping 1 base wire up, and then come up between the 2, use that to push nice and tight. Over the top of the next 2, and make your wraps nice and close together. Come up between them, and now we reach the top 2 like this. Over the top of those 2, and then we'll come up between the top 2 there, and then just remember to do that final wrap around the top wire by itself, just to kind of finish off this round nicely. And then bring the weaving wire all the way down behind all the base wires. And again, because especially at the beginning, I like to just use my pliers to help tighten this up, because you can see it kind of wants to separate a little bit naturally, but you can get it nice and tight by just squeezing it together here. And you get a really nice look. And also just straighten it out. And there you go. That was now the second round. So you now just want to continue like this, making rounds after each other, and you're building up this whole length of weave, remembering before I go too much further, just to even out the ends of these base wires here, so I have the lengths left that I need to be able to finish it off, because I can still just move my weave a little bit, but once I've done a few more rounds I won't really be able to move it that easily. So I just need to remember to keep it in the place that I want it to sit. So I kept weaving and I reached the length that I want. Now the length that I have here is about 4 centimeters or 1.5 inch. It's really up to you how long you want this, because this is going to kind of be the side of the bracelet. It's because I want the rose part to not be all the way around the wrist basically. So I'm making these a little on the longer side, but obviously you can make them short if you want more roses. But this is just what I have. And now what we've got to do next is continue to weave, but around not all of these wires, but just some of them. So what I'm doing is I've got my weaving wire coming down behind all of them again, and instead of just continuing this weave around all of them, I'm just going to do the same weave but only around the bottom 2 wires there. So there are also 2 shorter ones. So again, just bring your weaving wire all the way down behind, and you just want to keep doing the same weave. So around the bottom one, and push that down, then over the top of both of them, like this, and again push that down nice and tight, and then we need to come up between the 2 that we just wrapped across the top of. So you can see it's exactly the same weave, but now instead of wrapping over the next 2 or the top of the next 2, you just want to wrap around the single one of these 2. I think I just went up one. So instead of continuing to kind of move upwards, we're just sticking with these 2. You can kind of separate them out a little bit if you want to, just to make sure we don't get any of the other ones. Make a little bit of space between them. So basically we're doing the second one from the bottom is the top one, but it's exactly the same way as the top one that we did before, but we're now only doing 2 in total. And that was 1 round, and continue. Just go back straight down to the bottom one and start the next round. And now you just want to keep weaving like this until we have the length that we need. Now this is going to be on one side of the roses that kind of frames them in. So then the length that I weaved here is about 9 centimeters. Doesn't have to be too precise, because we can always add more to it. We're probably going to have to adjust it once we've made the other side and also the roses in the middle. But that's just the length for now. And then what I'm going to do is we want to cut off the wire now from the reel. And because we're not 100% sure if we need to wrap or weave a little bit more, what I'm going to do is leave a bit of a tail. So obviously we have the option to add some more wraps, some more length to the weave. So otherwise I'm just going to cut it off. And then this bottom side of the frame, you could say, is done for now. So now I'm going to take the end of my weaving wire here, that's free again now, and then move back up towards the other end of the weave. And we need to do the same that we just did here. So weave around 2 base wires. Now I need you to do the top 2 though. I'm going to take the very end and put in behind those base wires and just have a little tail to hold on to. And otherwise we basically just need to start up and do the same thing. So I'm only focusing on weaving around these top 2 wires. So again, if you need to, you can just gently push things a little bit apart from each other. And then just picking up the weave in the same way around the bottom one, first of all by itself. Make sure to push it all the way down to sit right next to this larger weave down here over the top of both of them. Come up between the 2. And again, I'm going to use this to push down, because then once you've wrapped a few, if you can get it right down to this end here, it's going to be seamless, the transition between this end of the weave and then into the top framed part here. It's going to look like it's just continued, like it obviously is on the bottom there, but we are just starting with a new wire. So you just want to continue doing this to get to about the same length as the bottom one. So now weave the other side as well, and I just use the first side that I did to measure against and know when to stop for now, but I haven't cut off this weaving wire just yet, so it's still attached to the reel, because we're going to need to use that to finish off this end with once we've done all the roses in the middle. And that's what I'm going to be using the 2 wires in the middle for, though we haven't weaved anything around yet. We're just going to use them to actually make the roses like you would make the normal wirework roses. Now obviously it's going to be a little bit more difficult because everything is connected here, but you just have to kind of work around the other parts. Now you can open up the outer weave sections a little bit if you need to. And then what I'm going to do is these 2 bare wires in the middle, I'm going to bring them up and push them up right against basically where they can't go any further, where they're coming out from the weave. Now you can also just take some pliers here, chain hose pliers, and just make that bend as sharp as possible. So basically they're coming straight up from the rest. And this is then the position to start the very first little rows. And then you can see we have one that's kind of more to the left and one more to the right. Now what I'm going to do is actually cross them over each other. So something like that. So they then come out to opposite sides. I'm just going to untangle the wires because these are obviously the longer lengths as well, because we're going to be using more of this wire obviously to make the roses. So this is how, also I'm doing this because it's how you would start the normal wirework roses. So now crossing opposite sides, and now we need to start twisting them here. So in the beginning it can be a bit fiddly kind of just to get it started, but also because obviously these lengths are longer. Still, the more roses we make, the more wire is going to get used up, and the shorter they will become, the lengths of wire. So I'm starting to twist them here. So I'm turning them in the same direction around each other, almost kind of creating a little knot there in the middle, you could say. Just bringing the wire with me. Now this first rose I want to not be too large, because obviously it's up to you if you don't want the graduation, but I do, so I want this to be almost just like a little rosebud. So I'm just going to do a quite small one here first of all, so I don't want to go around too many times. So once I've done that little twist, I then want to start bringing the wire around like you would actually create the rose. So you lift up the front one, and then you bring the other one underneath. Like that, and then that's the new front one. And now they're going to keep basically chasing each other instead of being opposite each other. Then you lift up that new front one, you bring the back one underneath that, and that then becomes the new front one. So the wires now keep swapping places, and I want to make sure as well that I'm keeping this fairly tight, so you don't want it too open, because you kind of just have that little rosebud going on. So we continue here, and it's just a matter of doing this. Like I said, you can completely do it how you want to. You don't have to do it graduate. You can do them all the same size if that's what you prefer. But you just keep moving the wires around here, like I mentioned, chasing each other, keeping it nice and tight, lifting up that first one and bringing the back one underneath and becoming the new front one. And then I'm moving back towards the right here. So that's what we always want to make sure of, because obviously I'm starting on this side. We need the roses to grow across the bracelet and sit in between these sections on the sides. So I always have to make sure I end up with my wires when I'm done with the rose on the right side here, so we can grow them next to each other. So looking at this, I think I just can do one more. So bring the back one underneath, because then my wires here are on the very side of this little first rows. Now you can always as well along the way use your pliers to help maneuver any wires, especially because it can be a little bit fiddly to get your fingers in there if it's a little bit of a small area. But this is basically the first little rosebud that we're starting out with. And now I'm then going to take my chain nose pliers here, because I just want to help my wires be in the right position for the next rows. So they are on this side of the first row, so I want it to be, but I want it to also come out towards where I need to create the next row. So I go in right where they're ending that first rows, and then I want to bend them so they basically come back straight out to the side, but again kind of next to each other here. Something a little bit like this. Now it doesn't have to be too perfect, because we can always, these kind of transition points will more or less end up underneath the roses. It's just more important to kind of get the directions in place. Now I have the first rose, and now we need to start the second one. So what I'm going to do is now we need to start judging it as well. So for this one we can look at the first one that we just made and kind of judge the spacing. So the next one here I kind of want to make about the same size as this. So that means I'm just going to take my pliers here. We need to then place them where kind of the middle of the rose is going to be, on the right side of the pliers. And then I want to take my wires and basically do the same thing that I did with the first one. Bend them back up against the pliers so they come out at a 90-degree angle like that. Just like before. And that's how we're going to start each rose. And this is now position the wires are in to create the next rows. Now what you can do here to make it a little bit easier to do that initial crossover is place the pliers right before that bend, and then again take your wires there and cross them to opposite sides and push them down to basically then get started with that twist around each other, just like before. So it's kind of first of all just a matter of getting this started, that twist in the middle, and kind of connecting those wires, tying them together, before we then just continue bringing the wires around again into that position where they're just chasing each other. So now same principle, and like I mentioned, this one I want to be about the same size as the first one. Before then, from the next one on, I'm going to start increasing the size of them. And as you can see here as well, as I'm moving my way around, the wires are now going over the kind of transition wires where they're coming out from that first rose, which then helps hide them. So we don't have to worry too much about the straight wires we have between the roses, because it gets covered by the next one. And that's where judging the distance between the previous rows and then the point where you bend your wires up comes in as well. Obviously is important. So keep bringing these around, and I can see I'm pretty much getting to that same size. So I now want to make sure that my wires end up on the right side of the rows to be able to bring them out for the next one. Now what you can also do, as I'm getting a few more made here, you can also kind of push the roses up a little bit and try and just focus on them more. It's up to you how you prefer to work with this. Then I'm just going to get my wires in position, get them straight out to the side here. Just smooth them out as I go as well, because obviously you're kind of working with them a lot. And the other one I just want to bend out as well to come straight back out to the side. And there we go, you can just bring them together. And then if you just want to adjust anything, sometimes as well I like using the pliers and kind of just taking this very end and guide it a little bit in underneath the rose that we just made. So you can see I now have two right next to each other, more or less same size, similar enough anyway. And the next one I want to start increasing the size like I said. So again, judging where I need the bend to be, I place my pliers on the two wires here. Now during the increasing of the roses, what I basically am doing is I'm increasing more or less by 1 round per rose. So I'm basically going to get to about that size and then do an extra round, and that's then the next size up, and then continue with that. But I'm also going to make sure this is going to be the middle one that I add. I'm going to make sure none of the roses become larger than that. So I'm kind of just finding that balance between them. So gradually increasing the size, but making sure it's not too much so they don't get too big. Then bend the wires up, cross them over to opposite sides, and then start your twist. And then otherwise it's just the same. With that initial twist, as you can see, you can kind of push your wires up a bit with the roses. And then we get going with the next one. And you just keep going like this until, if you want to increase like I'm doing here, obviously you're doing that along the way, until you reach that point that's going to be the middle, where I'm going to add in the beaded rose. So I now made all my roses on the one side here, and I've ended up with 6 as you can see. And I've got to the point where I'm going to be in the middle and I'm going to add my bead. So I'm just adding that onto one of the wires, and then I'm going to push it all the way down because I want that to sit right close to the other one, just like the roses I made are sitting right close together, so we don't really get any of the wire showing ideally, if we can help it. Push it down. Obviously we want the front of the rose to be facing upwards and outwards, just like the other ones. Now it's added onto one wire, and I'm going to then use the other wire to kind of just fasten it in place a little bit, because right now it's loose and can kind of move all over the place. So what you want to do is make sure it's pushed all the way down there, and then you just want to kind of use the other wire to brace it a little bit. So I'm going to keep it on the back still though, but I just want to bring it around the back a little bit, but making sure it's pushed all the way down and then around to the other side. So if you can kind of see on the back here, so it's going to stop it from flopping around too much. Now of course on this side we want to just kind of seal it in place, so I'm just going to wrap it around. Just the once is fine, making sure everything's still nice and tight, and then you can see it sits by itself a lot better. And on the back it's just using that wire to kind of brace it a little bit, and then just bring the wires close together, have them coming out to the side next to each other, and then basically we're ready to just continue making more roses. Now this is obviously on the other side of the middle one bead we just added, and I'm still going to do the graduated ones, but obviously in the opposite direction, so going large, and then going to try and make best I can this next one as similar to the last one on the other side I did, and the next one after that as similar to the next one on this side. So basically graduate it downwards in size this time, and obviously make the same amount, so we end up with a nice and as symmetrical as possible row of roses with that bead one in the middle. So you just grab your pliers, place them where you want the next rose to start, and same technique as we've done all the other ones. So just gonna get it started here, bring the wires up against the pliers and then cross them over. So making the roses in the exact same way. So I now made the equivalent roses on the other side here. As you can see, we have a nice graduation from one side to the middle there, that bead in the middle, and then down the other side again. And then obviously this is going to sit across, be the main part of the bracelet. Now what you'll also see here is that where my roses end, my weed sections on the sides, they end before that. So that's why I said, first of all, to leave a tail on the first side. So don't cut it off right up here, but leave a decent tail in case you need to make more. And also left the wire on the other side so we can just pick that back up, because what we need to do is get the weed sections here to basically finish where the roses finish. Because it's going to be the same principle as down here. These weed sections on the side start where that first row starts. So what now I want to do is just go back to these sections and basically continue the weave until, as I lay them next to each other, the weaves finish where that last rows finish as well. And then once we've done that on both sides, we're going to then connect them all back up together again. So now you can see I kept weaving there, so we have the lengths of those weave sections reaching, first of all, they're even with each other, but they're now reaching that very final rows, because obviously you want to make sure that it's all sitting properly. Nothing's kind of curved or bent out of shape, because when they're then even, like I said, we need to start connecting them together. And I'm going to do that basically in the same way as we did in the beginning part. We just already have all the wires here, so I'm going to basically make this section again. So I'm going to take, my wire is still attached, my weaving wire is still attached to that top section. So what I'm going to do is put all my wires here flat next to each other, and then just make sure that final wrap up there is nice and tight, and then bring it down behind all of them. And now we want these to lay close to each other, because obviously we want the weave to be nice and tight like it is in the beginning. And just take a little bit of time kind of getting your wires in position, and make sure to straighten them out as well. And now they already have their place in order next to each other, so you just want to leave them like that. And then we want to start weaving. So just go, you don't want to obviously pull too hard because it'll make them kind of overlap. Just hold them in place to begin with. Then I want to start with the bottom two here, just separate them out slightly, and then pick up that same weave, just go around the bottom one by itself, and then over the top of two, making sure I pick the right one. Once we've done just a couple of rounds, it will get much easier, because you will kind of sorted out all the wires here. But just the first 1 or 2 rounds, we just have to make sure we get it all in place. Come up between the two, you can see exactly the same weave. And then moving on to the next. So this is using one of the wires that's coming from the rose section. Go down between the 2 middle wires, and then push that nice and tight, come up between the 2 wires we just went over the top of, and make sure you push that nice and tight down there. You can also use some pliers to help you, just to help maneuver your wire exactly where you want it to go. Over the top of the next 2. Up between them. And now moving to the next section. So just gradually getting them all reconnected with each other here. And then finally, over the top of the final 2. And then just that final wrap around the top one by itself. Now what you'll probably find is that this round that we've just done, it kind of wants to sit away from the other sections and also the roses, because obviously we're kind of forcing the wires to go back together. So just push the section close in again. You can use your pliers to help do that, to basically get it to sit as if these sections on the sides are just continuing like they do down here on the other end. So again, once you've done a few rounds, it will end up staying in place. So just kind of keep working with it as you go. Come down behind all the base wires, push it down, and then you just start again. So you basically now want to make the same length that we have down here. So obviously they're even, so we have this as the midsection of the bracelet. And once you've done that, all that's really left to do is finish everything off. So I now weave the same length here as the beginning. So we're done using the weaving wires, we can just cut the excess off. So you just want to kind of turn it around, and the last wrap that we did was around the single base wire, which you'll want to do when you cut off the excess here. I'm going to cut it off so there's only a slight little tail left like that. So if you put your finger over it here, you can feel a little bit of the wire sticking out. But then you want to take your chain nose or flat nose and squeeze that in, and then I like to get so the very end of that wire basically gets pushed in between the base wires, so it's then tucked away. So there we go. And then of course what we just want to do as well, I like to do here, is go through the rest of it and just kind of finish off the other little tails that we have as well. We might as well just get that done. So now we want to finish off the ends of the base wires here. So I'm just going to flip this around to the back. And then what I'm going to do is, I'm going to first of all take the two outer wires, the one on either side. So I want to make sure that my weave is pushed completely down, so it's not slipped upwards or anything, but pushed all the way down. And then I'm just taking my left one first, and I'm going to push that against to right where it's coming out from the weave, and then over to the opposite side. So this is across the back of the bracelet. So try and basically put a 90-degree angle, a bend in there, and straight out to the side. Then I'm going to do the same with the other one, but in the opposite direction. So again, make sure the weave is pushed down, and then you bend the outer wire in over the others and push it down nicely. So they're now kind of crossing each other there, going to opposite sides. Then I'm going to take my chain nose pliers here, and this one, the first one that I bent, is kind of my front one, you could say. So I'm going to go onto that and kind of find the midpoint between the wires that I haven't bent yet. So the midpoint of there, and then place my pliers and put a bend by bringing the wire back up and going in that same direction as the others. So it's coming back out, but we just put a little couple of bends in. So something like that. Then I'm going to use the other one to just separate these out just a little bit. So it's coming straight up in the middle there, you can see. I'm going to use the other one that came from the outer side, on the opposite side of the piece, and bring that around the one I just bent back upwards, making sure I'm bringing it around right at that bend and only around this wire, so not the other ones here. So just take your time and do that, and make sure the wraps that we're doing here are nice and tight to each other. So if you need to as well, you can use your pliers, push them together, and also to help make the wraps themselves tighter. So I'm just going to make sure my wraps are in place, and something like that. I have it around twice now. Now I need to cut off the excess, and for that I bring in my flush cutters here. So I'm going to get right down to where I did the last wrap and place my pliers on the wire that I want to cut off, so close to the wire going straight up here. And of course we're going to have a little piece just sticking out, so I want to make sure you just go in with chain nose or flat nose pliers to just squeeze that in and basically complete that final wrap. So like that. And then we can just also push, if it's kind of coming a bit too far in towards the back here, we can kind of just push it out a little bit and bring it back up. And this is now, you could say, the middle wire. It's going straight up. We now have two on either side. They're the ones coming just straight from the end of the weave still. So what I'm going to do with them is keep them on the side. So I have two on the right and two on the left. I'm going to bring them down over the wire that we brought in from the side. So just do one side at a time here. So something like that. And the other one as well. Down and over. I'm just doing them both at the same time together, as if they were one pretty much. And then bring them down over. And kind of in towards the back side. Then I want to get rid of the excess of them, and we have them coming over, and then basically I want to cut them off. So there's a little bit on this side here, but not too much, so not these long lengths obviously. I want to cut them down, so there's a couple of millimeters or so, something like that. And then once I cut the first one, I like to kind of use that to cut the other one. So you can put the back of the cutters against them and then bring them to the other side, just so they get somewhat even. Something like that. And now these are also sticking out a little bit, as you can see there. So we just want to make sure that we again take the chain nails and just push them in to kind of close that up. You can see there, obviously the same on the other side. However you need to come in. And then just make sure to put your finger over it. If you can't feel anything scratchy, then that's fine. Otherwise you just want to squeeze them a bit more. So now the ends are finished off nice and neatly. And all we have left is this length of wire. And I'm going to simply use this now to make a wrap loop with, so we can attach our findings to that. So I start out with my chain nose pliers to put the first angle in there. Now put your pliers on that length of wire just a little bit above the other wraps there. So there's just a little bit of space. And I like to kind of do it on the side like this. And then I put my bend in. Approximately 90 degrees. Not exactly, but close enough. Then I like to use my 6-step Elming pliers, because by using them the same step there on both ends, I know the two loops are going to be exactly the same size, but you can also easily use round nose pliers. I place them on the bend and then bring the end here back around to form a full circle. Like that. Then I take my chain nails again, grab onto the circle so it keeps its shape, and then this tail I use to wrap around just below it and basically fill in that little space that we left on the wire in the first place. So once we fill that in, the wire comes down and meets up with the other wraps. When you run out of space, you just take your flush cutters, cut off the excess, and then of course just flatten that very end down as well. And then we have our little loop that we can use to attach our findings. Now of course you want to repeat this exact same thing on the other end as well. So now I've finished off both ends here, and I've also then used the loops to attach my clasp and my extended chain. Then all I have to do is shape it. So you can either kind of shape this around something of the size and shape you want it to have, like a bracelet mandrel or something else, or you can just use your hands and fingers. So what I like to do is kind of go in and start putting a curve into it. Obviously we want the roses here to be facing outward, so this is the back. And basically you want to make sure you don't go into one place and put a big bend into it, because that'll make it out of shape, but just gradually put a curve into it, going from side to side like this here. And then basically the idea is to bring the two ends closer together so we can obviously use the clasp. So now we've finished shaping it and can use the clasp. Now in this case here I just attached a loft claw clasp and an extended chain, but you can of course make your own or use a different kind of clasp as well. And then this is the finished bracelet. What you can also do, if you feel like these frames are a little loose on yours, then you can always kind of use a weaving wire and just kind of attach it to the roses along the way. That's completely up to you, but otherwise this is the finished bracelet. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Now please feel free to check out my channel. I have loads of other kinds of tutorials as well and videos, but thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.